tell us, how were you recruited to the CIA? I want to hear, it was some story of a beautiful girl sitting next to you in the Yale Library. How did this happen?
It was the Aston Martin she was driving, actually. The true story is coming back from drill one day in ROTC. This was so long ago, we had a draft in the country then. And on Mondays, we used to have to drill. This is Yale in New Haven. And on the way back, I was walking past the placement office, and I thought, someday I'll get out of the Army, I'll need a job. Maybe I ought to stop in and see what they're recommending. And I ended up talking to some guy who gave me the strangest name I've ever heard in my life. And he said, "So what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm an ancient Greek major, and I'm not sure how I translate that into money." And he said, "I don't think you ever will." He said, "But here's a number." And I said, what do you want to do with it? He said, "Well, call me someday." Well, about 8 months went by, and I got a call from somebody in Washington who called my roommate and said, "Hey, you're supposed to be in Washington today for an interview." And I said, "I am. Nobody told me." What interview, where? And it was CIA doing its thing. And they asked me to come down and talk to them a little bit, and I did. And I said, "Wow, sounds like a pretty good deal." And young, unmarried, see the world, a lot of adventure. How does this get better? Well, it was better until I got married and had children, and then it was not quite as much as adventure. But my wife will tell you that part of the story. It was a very different CIA in those days, and it was a great organization, in my view, because it was so mission-oriented, and everybody was so aware of the uniqueness of their responsibility. Those were the hot Cold War days. We had Cuba, we had a lot of stuff going on. And it was a time where you would not have ever thought of being a whistleblower or talking to a newspaper. You took a secrecy oath, you meant it for life. Our cover was so complete that I didn't even tell my father-in-law when I married my wife. And my wife was brought in and asked a whole lot of questions about her personal life, which if she'd answered that way today, she would have probably not been allowed to join the agency. But she answered all the questions in those days you could be blackmailed for, which today are badges of honor that were not. It has changed very dramatically with the times. And I distinctly remember my father-in-law, this is a true story, bang, bang, bang on his door. They had a nice home in a rural area outside of Pittsburgh. And they had a domestic help. They had a man of all action around the house. And he answered the door. He didn't answer the door. My father-in-law answered it. And this guy said, "I would like to speak to Mr. So-and-so." He said, "Well, you have to go around the back door. Mr. So-and-so's back there." And the guy went out and came back, knocked again. And my father-in-law said, "I told you, if you want to see him, you have to go around the back door." And this guy said, "Well, who are you?" And my father-in-law, was a fairly important industrialist in Pittsburgh at the time, said, "Well, who are you?" And he said, "Well, I'm not telling." And he turned around and went away. That was the beginning of the unraveling of my cover. It went downhill very fast. The story that got around was that the Gosses are very, very important people from New England, and they want to make sure that this little girl that he's going to marry is up to snuff. That was a huge embarrassment, as you can imagine. But we got over it. We've had